happy birthday to Tim. Yeah. So, I'm back from Florida, and I have decided
To follow
I don't want to move there. You can have Florida, it's too hot for me. It was brutally hot, and I think I'm Disneyed out. 2-hour wait, hour and a half wait for a ride, kind of takes the flavor out of the ride. It was interesting trip, and then 2 days before we come home, I can't get my phone open, and we had to wipe it.
Oh.
So if I don't call you for some reason, and make sure that when you somebody texted me yesterday, Susan did, and I had to put back, is this Susan? But if you call me, then I have your number, just let me know who you are. Because you know, what's amazing to me is how dependent we have become on this particular technology. And I don't think we realize it until something like this happens. And then suddenly you go, oh my goodness gracious. I mean, I used to be the kind that would write phone numbers down, have my little directory, and I don't do that anymore. And so I lost it all. Passwords, everything. And so this is the world we live in. And we're talking about the young kids, Generation Z. They are a fully automated generation. They are the first generation who had cell phones, and they don't know, and they're amazing with computers too. I mean, it was Ben that I had to call to fix my phone. Yes. Yeah. What's this, a pencil? What is this for? Okay, I have been challenged in my personal reading through Proverbs the last month or so. Not in the sense that I found some new profound doctrine about God, but rather in that I found, or a better way to put it is, I have rediscovered a truth I have known for a long time and continue to struggle with. And that's this: the way we talk to others matters.
Amen.
I have come to the conclusion that there's no better question or a good idea for us to teach ourselves and our children about the wisdom of speaking carefully. Our ability or our inability to control our tongues will determine more than anything else the level of success that we enjoy in our relationships. I've learned that the book of Proverbs has an awful lot to say to us about managing our words. Probably more than any other subject. I'm floored, actually, at how often Solomon talks about minding our words. And if the wisest man that whoever lived thought that this topic was so critical, maybe we better pay attention to it. Our ability or inability to control our tongues will determine, more than anything else, the level of success we have in our relationships and in our lives. If we can't seem to say the right thing, and you constantly seem to say the wrong thing, you may one day find yourself all alone, alienated from important things and important people in our lives, and that is truth. Our words are spoken to others. Our words are important. They matter. Didn't Jesus teach us that? Some people find it really easy to express themselves. They have no trouble saying what's on their minds. You know people like that? We usually refer to these people as a brilliant conversationalist, because they have this ability to hit certain key points and it makes sense. But then there's others that they can talk on and on and on. Countless words, and they never seem to get around to saying anything at all. And I don't know, I've read some authors that are like that. And you read the book and you're saying, yeah, I think that could have been summed up in one sentence. Some people use big, confusing words, and sometimes it's frustrating to those of us that listen. There's an old Dick Van Dyke show, and had Dick Van Dyke at a party filled with these pseudo-intellectuals. And Dick Van Dyke got trapped into a one-sided conversation with a self-absorbed philosophy professor. One of the guests said, "Isn't Dr. So-and-so brilliant?" And Dick Van Dyke said, "He has the ability to say things which on the surface are seemingly vague, but in reality are actually meaningless." And that sums up the way some people make conversation. The Bible teaches a different approach to us about our conversations. It teaches us to use our words sparingly and to speak with caution. But we all know there is more to speaking effectively than being able to string words together. It starts in our brain. It starts in our thoughts. The Ten Commandments, they have 297 words. Psalm 23 has 118 words. The Lord's Prayer is 56 words long. Yet, in one report, the Department of Agriculture needed 15,629 words to discuss the prices of cabbage. It's not using a lot of words that makes a difference. It's using the right words. I think James, brother of Jesus, I think he had a lot to say and a lot to teach us about words as well. He said in James 1:19, "Brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." And some of us, we have anger beckoning a lot of times. Maybe we need to backtrack. Why am I angry? Because I'm not slow to speak, and because I'm not quick to listen. And this is just an not just an Old Testament quote that we have. A New Testament is filled with the same thing. We need to get into the habit of speaking carefully, that our words matter. We need to learn to think first, talk second. Today we want to focus on the think first part. Before you speak, here are some things that Solomon says we need to consider. Number one, we don't have to say everything we know or speak at all. We should first consider not saying anything at all. That's been a hard thing for me to learn. I'm going to tell you something that after 62 years I am just learning and just taking to heart, and I think it absolutely is going to liberate me and have an impact on my relationships. Are you ready for this? Here goes. Shut up at first. I need to learn that. I think most of us need to learn that. Shut up at first. One pastor was having dinner with friends one evening and they began discussing Christian music. And one lady named an artist, I won't say who, and she said, "Oh, he's my absolute favorite. I'm so blessed when I listen to his music." And there was another person at the table that said, "Oh, really? A person in my church was in a 12-step program for overeaters, and that singer was in the group too. And did you know he's bulimic? He's been gorging and purging since he was a teenager." Now, he didn't have to say that. For starters, I prefer not to hear about gorging and purging when I'm trying to eat. I don't know about you. There's a reason why those groups have the name anonymous in the title. People's privacy should be respected. And the babbling, that little bit of inside info, did that build those other people up that were listening? Just because we know something about someone doesn't mean we have to spill it. Now, if it's sometime in the future, this particular Christian artist decides to go public with his struggle with food addiction, that's his choice. Until then, it's his personal business. And I'm not saying he's wrong or right, just let him say it. You may know something about somebody, but just because you know it and just because it's true doesn't mean you have to say it. If what you say does not build up others, if it doesn't bring glory to the name of God, to the name of Christ, then maybe we are better off keeping our mouths shut. You know what it's called? It's called gossip. And decorated the way that you want, it always is gonna smell the same. I have learned, and I hope I keep learning and doing this, if what is shared about another person, especially if it has any kind of negative flavor to it, and they are not present in the conversation, it's gossip. So don't talk. And if they are present, you speak with their consent. You know, sometimes we speak without their consent, and what happens? I mean, I wonder how many people have been humiliated because we've shared something without their consent.
Amen.
How many have been embarrassed and maybe even kind of keep themselves a little scarce. Solomon said in Proverbs 17:27, a man of knowledge uses words with restraint. Before we speak, let's consider saying nothing at all, because we don't have to say everything we know. So that's the first thing. We don't have to say everything we know or even speak at all. Secondly, we don't have to say everything we think. A little bit different. Some people believe they know a little bit more about the subject than anyone else. And they believe it is their duty to let everyone know that when the chance presents itself. Whenever the subject comes up in conversation, whether it's the stock market or companies, criminal justice, basketball, COVID, politics, religion, they believe they sort of have this nugget of truth, and then some of them the first and final word on this whole issue. And of course they share it with you. I love it when a person shares and is speaking with me, and they preface their comments with, I don't know if I'm right about this, but this is what I read. Or, I'm not an expert on this topic, but this is what I know. It's non-threatening, it's humble, it's honest, and suddenly it allows the other person or persons to listen to what you're saying. And we can all fall into this habit unintentionally. But we need to watch out for it. Ever heard someone say this? For once, I'd like to bring up a topic, conversation, without having to listen to you tell me about it for 15 minutes. It's not just exhausting, but it kills honest conversation. I know when I'm in a situation like that and someone's carrying on in the conversation, as I just said, I personally stop sharing. How many times did you bring up a topic you were concerned about only to have somebody else jump in and sort of dictate what they knew about that topic, and that you might not have even gotten to your point yet? And so you just shut up and you walk away, never really saying what you were originally intending to. Now, I'm guilty of doing that. But we have to remember, a wise man, a man of knowledge, a woman of knowledge uses words with restraint. Have you ever seen the character of Cheers? Cliff Clavin of Cheers, right? He was constantly saying out loud everything he was thinking. No matter what subject came up, Cliff knew about it. And he let everybody down. And he became the object of jokes. I heard someone say in a group of friends, oh, there's this guy just like Cliff Clavin that's there. If we look at our group of friends, and we don't see someone like him, maybe we ought to take a long look at ourselves. We might be that person. We don't have to say everything we think. Before we speak, let's keep this principle in mind. Silence looks like knowledge. So remember to think first and speak second. So we don't have to say everything we know or even speak at all. We don't have to say everything we think. And third, we can give the impression that we're wise if we keep silent. That's something I want to capitalize on. Solomon said it, Proverbs 17:28, even a fool is thought wise if he keeps silent. Yeah, really, we got to take that one and put it in our back pocket. Shut up, Dave. Don't talk. Don't think you're smarter than you really are. I had heard of one guy told this story. He said, I took this verse that I just read into consideration a few years ago when I started a new job with a software publishing company. We were developing a new product in a joint venture with IBM. And my first week on that job was spent in all-day planning sessions at IBM's Lexington, Kentucky plant. At that time, my computer knowledge was extremely limited. I could spell IBM. That was all I knew about computers. As we sat through these 8-hour sessions day after day, words that I didn't understand kept flying through the air, such as config.sys, OCR, readability, file buffering, and on and on and on. Throughout the meetings, I kept nodding my head and saying things like, well, I can't argue with that. Then, when we began to discuss parts of the project that I actually knew something about, I was able to make a significant contribution. My comments carried more weight because I hadn't blown my credibility by talking about something I knew nothing about. So, we can give the impression that we're wise if we keep our mouths shut. I used to have a friend of mine, Martha, and Martha was brilliant at this. And she would sit and she would listen to you, and she wouldn't say anything. And we called her wise, and she was wise. Because even after she listened to you, she maybe would walk away and not even say anything, not even give you any advice. But the fact that we were able to talk, the fact that we felt heard, that was her wisdom. Fourth, we don't have to repeat everything we hear. The problem with repeating gossip is that there is a better than even chance that what we heard isn't completely true. Isn't that in our society right now? We call it journalism. Gossip is a killer and gets embellished as it's passed from person to person. You ever played telephone as a kid? We were sitting in a big circle. When I was a youth group leader, we would always do that. The first kid, you would whisper in a phrase. and then that person would whisper to the next person, goes around the big circle, and at the end, the last person would say the phrase. And it was usually not even close to what it started. The subject of gossip is one that I believe Christians need to take careful note of. I don't think we've taken this as seriously as we should, especially as Christians. We don't see, in Christian circles, we don't necessarily say, well, I'm going to go and visit with so-and-so and catch up on all the latest gossip. We don't necessarily say that. We say, I'm going to go visit so-and-so, and we use a word like, oh, and we're going to, I call it the God card, and we're going to spend some time praying. Or, hey, I have a prayer request. Now, I'm not knocking prayer requests. And it's important that we do that. But in some Christian circles, I have known an awful lot of gossip that gets shared through that God card. Here's a prayer request. Suddenly, it's like there's nothing wrong with saying it. Because it's spiritual. It's a prayer request. Now, I'm picking on that, but you know where I'm coming from. So, what's going on? We say, and all of a sudden, this person's name is mentioned who isn't there, and oops, even if it isn't true, damage has just been done. We need to begin to take gossip seriously. I have people in my life I don't talk to about my heart, seriously, because I don't trust them. I want so much sometimes to pour out my heart in conversation to certain people, but I don't trust them. Why? Because too often with me, they've talked to me about someone else. So if they're doing that with me, what are they going to do when I'm not around? So I just shut up about my heart. We don't want to do that. As Christians, we want to share our heart. Proverbs 16:28. This is what Solomon says about gossips. A perverse man, now listen, a perverse man or woman stirs up dissension, and a gossip separates close friends. That's something to think about. Did it ever occur to you that when we talk bad about someone, when we gossip about someone, God actually considers our actions perverse? It may seem hard to believe, but that's what the Bible says. And in my opinion, the truer it is, the juicier it is, the more despicable it is to God when we repeat it. God would much rather we just zip our mouth closed. Solomon said in Proverbs 17:9 that he who covers an offense promotes love, but whoever repeats the matter separates close friends. Repeating everything we hear destroys relationships. Bottom line, period. This is why we need to think before we speak and consider whether we should be saying anything at all. We don't have to repeat everything we hear. Fifth, we should consider whether or not we have all the facts. Fake news, right? That's the big topic. We can go on and on about that, but the first step in managing our mouth is to consider not saying anything at all. The second step is discerning whether or not we have the correct facts. Do you remember a guy named Richard Jewell? He was a security officer who was first on the scene when a bomb exploded in the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta, and he acted conscientiously and courageously, and he was, quite indeed, a hero. Then, as typical in such events, the FBI developed suspicions about Jewell and began to consider him a suspect in the bombing. It eventually became a movie. Some of you might have seen the movie. The FBI was simply doing its job by suspecting everyone. However, the media went wild. And they brought the story to the newspaper. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution printed a story packed with innuendos and misleading comments. The New York Post called him a fat former failed sheriff's deputy. And a story that crossed the line between reporting him as a possible suspect and even declaring him guilty. Even the great Tom Brokaw compromised his credibility by saying, quote, "They probably have enough to arrest him right now, probably enough to prosecute him, but we always want enough to convict him." Now, as it turned out, Richard Jewell didn't plant the bomb, and he really was a hero. He put his life in danger to save other people, and he was ripped to shreds by the press. And for once, this time, this particular event, the media was held responsible and accountable. A number of news organizations, including NBC, they settled with Jewell for an undisclosed amount of money rather than go through the humiliation of a public trial. And this event teaches us a couple things. For instance, just because a friend says something, or any TV or radio personality says something, it doesn't mean it's true. We need to remember when we watch the news, when we listen to people speaking, there's a very real possibility that they only have a fraction of the story. Didn't we see that in the shooting down in Texas? How many times did it change? Especially in our day and age now. This is vital. It's vital that we get the facts, all the facts. Another thing that story of Richard Jewell taught us is we can do a lot of damage by speaking before we get the facts. This poor guy, his life was ruined, and all of a sudden, even when he was declared the hero, because of all this media reporting, there was always a shadow. There was always a question mark. That this is the world we live in. And we as Christians, we can take the stand and say, no, we need to make sure that we get the facts, all the facts. We don't want to cause any damage. We might never find ourselves in the kind of jam NBC was in after reporting lies about Richard Jewell, but we can be sure that if we open our mouths before we get all the facts, we are courting disaster for ourselves and everyone else involved, and we are going to end up having to sit down and apologize. Proverbs 18:13, this is what Solomon tells us. He who answers before listening, that is his folly and his shame. I remember too many times I flew off the handle because I thought my kids didn't listen to my instructions, and I spoke with anger to them. And more often than I care to admit, I didn't have all the facts. And as their dad, I had to sit down and apologize to them. And I'm sure I caused some damage, not only in my family, but in other relationships because of that very fact. The 15 minutes that I went jumping to the wrong conclusions ended up costing me. It reminds me of what Solomon said in Proverbs 14:3. A fool's talk brings a rod to his back, but the lips of the wise protect him. This is why we have to think first and speak second. Let's make sure that we have all the facts. Let's remember Solomon's wisdom, Proverbs 17:29. Man or woman of knowledge uses words with restraint. Let's speak carefully after considering whether or not we have all the facts. Then open our mouths. And 6, we should consider the best way to say what needs to be said. We don't live in a perfect world. We all know that. Sometimes we have to say some hard things that are true, and they're not pleasant to say. I've had to say them to others, and others have had to say them to me. And here's what I've learned, is that when they say those hard words to me, and there's caring and love behind it, and they've considered their words carefully, it's much easier to accept. And when they don't, I'm just loading my gun, because I'm going to be coming back. And you know what I mean, right? We're loading our gun with ammunition to fire back at them. Proverbs 15:23, Solomon gives us the wisdom here. A man finds joy in an apt reply. How good is a timely word. It takes effort and should be bathed in a lot of thought and prayer to make sure we say the right thing the right way. I heard of a state trooper pulled a man and his wife over for speeding on a deserted road. So he pulls the car over. The road was clear. The weather was fine. And the trooper told them that they were speeding, but he let them off with a warning. He even complimented the man and his wife for wearing their seatbelts. And right at that point, the wife leaned over and said, "Well, officer, when you drive at the speeds we do, you have to wear your seatbelt." So they drove away with the ticket. It's an example of not considering the best way to say something. Proverbs 15:1, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. We need to confront a spouse, a child, an employee, a problem in a relationship. We need to take the time to find the right way to go about saying it. We need to ask ourselves, how can I say this in such a way that I'm going to build them up and encourage them to do what's best for them? Most times we need to think how we can communicate to this guy or this girl in a gentle manner so that they will be receptive to what's being said. And a lot of us have some incredible wisdom, but the way that we speak, it hurts people from receiving that wisdom. Look for the best way to say what needs to be said. Proverbs 8:21. The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. When we speak to one another, we should keep our words in mind. Our words matter. Words have a tremendous power, and we need to make sure that we use them carefully. Proverbs 13:3 tells us, he who guards his lips guards his life, but he who speaks rashly will come to ruin. It is often true that there is some great danger in talking too much, especially when we talk before we think. Proverbs 10:19. When words are many, sin is not absent, but he who holds his tongue is wise. We don't have to take a vow of silence here. That's not what I'm saying. But it would benefit all of us that we make a commitment to listening first and speaking second. And while we're thinking, we consider whether we should say something or maybe not say it at all. Like my friend Martha. We can consider whether or not we have all the facts. We can consider the best way to say what needs to be said. And in guarding our lips that way, we guard our lives, we strengthen our relationships, we don't damage them, we don't hurt them. And we build up others into a closer walk with Jesus Christ, and they hear and receive from us, and it reflects on him, our Lord and Savior. Again, I'm astounded at how much Solomon talks about our words. Read it for yourself. It's shocking. Jesus demonstrated this to us. And he walked through life. He danced through life. And he said some hard things. But how many times did he say the right things? All the time. Sometimes he didn't say anything. And he just walked through a crowd. He's our example. Our words matter. And as we celebrate communion, as we remember what he's done for us, let's remember that he will hold us accountable for our words. As our gentlemen come and distribute the elements, let's think about